first act I'd like to see in the Scottish Music Hall of Fame is a band called Trout. Trout were led by a fella called Willie Rogan, and for me they were the greatest band that came out of Glasgow in the 1990s. At that time I used to do a club called the Kazoo Club in the 13th Note in Glasgow, and there were many great bands that were kicking around at that time. Some of them went on to build a bit of a name for themselves, like the Delgados or Mogwai or Bell and Sebastian, and others who were equally great didn't have as much impact on the world outside that very small scene in Glasgow at that time. And of all the bands that I used to put on and we all knew at that time, I'd say, and if you ask a lot of my contemporaries from that time as well, they'd probably agree with me, it was Willie Rogan and Trout. There are a few recordings that were made of the band at that time, but they don't really do any justice to how they existed and how they performed. Willie would come on stage with black makeup drawn around his face like that, because he had a comic book fantasy element to his performance. He would end the songs, and I've never seen a performer who was as lost in his performance and as primitive and as exciting and as challenging to the audience as Willie was. Really great raw rock and roll band, but also unlike any other band kicking around that I've ever seen since. Peculiarly Glasgow as well. All three guys in the band were from Glasgow, and I just wish whoever's watching this could have seen that band play in the 90s, because they were amazing. Probably, yeah, one of my favourite bands of all time. The second band I'd like to see are a little more well known, and that's Orange Juice. Love Orange Juice. James Kirk and Edwyn Collins wrote songs in this natural, poetic way. They were completely at odds with their surroundings at the time. They were so unmacho, taking their influences from disco as much as they were from punk rock. They were contrary, but who cares about that? What brilliant songs, totally amazing songs. Even now I can put on an Orange Juice song and it'll immediately put me into a great mood. It's funny as well, for me, Orange Juice were a band that came about through legend and mythology and hearsay. You know, like I got into that band at a time before the internet, when there wasn't really much information about them readily available at hand. And I had friends that told me about them and said, oh, there was a scene with this label called Postcard and it came out of West Princess Street, and it all seemed so immediately local and recognisable to me, but totally alien and exotic simultaneously. And I remember the first time I got a couple of Orange Juice records. It was in Paddy's Market in Glasgow. I picked up a copy of Breakfast Time and a copy of Poor Old Soul. I remember getting them home and playing them to death, and that's probably the moment where I fell in love with the band and still do. And also you have to think as well, like, what a huge influence they've been on the music that's come out of Glasgow since then. Not just in the sound that they made, which must have massively influenced the Pastels and every band that's come since then, but also their attitude towards making the music as well. The idea that Postcard could get together and put it out themselves, and you could be independent both as a label and in your attitude to what you make. I reckon probably a lot of people are going to say this guy and his band I'm going to say it as well because he was so magnificent. That's Alex Harvey and the sensational Alex Harvey Band. Because he is so Scottish and so representative of a city. The unapologetic accent, the performance, the vitality, just totally incredible. Also, I think Alex Harvey joins up a lot of eras, because I know that he started off in the sort of pre-Beatles rock and roll era, playing in beat groups in the Barras and places like that, and then sort of evolved through these various different bands through the 60s and eventually got the sensational Alex Harvey Band together. I don't think anybody performs like him or has done so. Although, I don't know, like sometimes when I hear some of the bands that are kicking around nowadays, like Frightened Rabbit or even Hubby, R.M. Hubbard, and the way that they, or Biffy Clyro, and the way that they sing in this sort of very strong, recognisable Scottish accent. Whenever I hear that, I think of Alex Harvey, and I sort of think, oh yeah, he was the first guy to do that in rock and roll. But I'm being distracted. I think the real reason he should be in the Hall of Fame is because he was an incredible performer and there was nobody like him, and fortunately there's lots of footage of him that we can still see and enjoy.